The old lighthouse keeper had spent 31 winters obeying one rule. When the sea went black, the light went on. No excuses, no delay, no mercy for a man who forgot. So when Jonas Vale climbed the spiral stairs that night, with the oil can in one hand and the storm shaking the glass above him, he knew exactly what the harbor expected. The tower had to burn before the fog swallowed the rocks. Then something knocked beneath the wind. Not on the door, not at the window. From below the cliff. Jonas froze with his hand on the lamp valve. The sound came again, thin and broken, almost lost under the roar of the tide. A child's voice. He ran down the stairs so fast his bad knee nearly folded under him. Outside, the gale hit like a fist. Needles of sleet cut across the lantern yard. The black rocks below the tower vanished and reappeared under sheets of white water. At first, he saw only foam. Then, a hand. Small fingers gripping a rope slick with ice. Jonas dropped to his stomach and reached over the ledge. He caught the first child by the wrist and hauled her up over the stone. Then the second, lighter than a bundle of soaked laundry, coughing seawater into the snow. The older girl could not have been more than 13. Her hair was plastered across a bruised face. One sleeve hung torn from her shoulder. The younger girl clung to her like a shadow, blue-lipped and trembling so hard her teeth clicked. Jonas dragged them both into the lee of the oil shed, wrapping his coat around their shoulders. "Who are you?" he asked. The older girl's eyes shot toward the tower. Then she grabbed his sleeve with both hands. "Please, don't light it." Jonas thought the storm had stolen the meaning from her words, but she said it again. "Don't light the tower. Men with the red lantern will know where we are." For the first time in 3 decades, Jonas Vale looked up at the dark glass of his own lighthouse and hesitated. Every instinct in his body screamed that the lamp had to burn. Ships trusted that flame. Men lived or died by it. But the girl was staring at him with the terror of someone who had already watched adults choose wrong. So Jonas did the one thing a keeper was never supposed to do. He left the tower dark. He carried the children into his cottage beside the keeper's wall, kicked the door shut against the storm, and set them down near the iron stove. The room smelled of lamp oil, salt, old wool, and peat smoke. It was not much of a home. 1 chair, 1 cot, 1 table scarred by years of solitary meals. But it was warm. That was all that mattered at first. He heated water. He cut away the stiff edges of their soaked clothing. He gave them blankets from the chest and broth from the pot, a spoonful at a time, because the younger child could barely swallow. The older one said her name was Mara March. The little one was Linny. After that, Mara closed her mouth like a locked box. Jonas did not force it open. He knew what fear did to the young. It made every question sound like a trap. So he worked quietly. He cleaned a gash above Mara's eyebrow. He wrapped Linny's ankle. He put bread within reach and turned his back so they could eat without feeling watched. Outside, the unlit tower stood like a giant holding its breath. Once, Jonas looked toward the window and saw a red glow move far down the coast. Not steady, not like a ship lamp. It swung once, vanished, then swung again from the rocks near Widow's Teeth, the reef no honest sailor approached at night. Mara saw it too. The bowl in her hands began to shake. Jonas moved between her and the window. "Nobody comes in here," he said. The girl whispered. "They left us there." Mara touched her sister's hair, warning her to stop, but the words had already escaped, and the room changed around them. Jonas heard the rest in pieces through the long night. A packet boat had gone off course in the fog. A false red lantern had blinked from the reef, pretending to mark safe water. Men had come in oilskins after the crash, not to rescue, but to strip the wreck. Mara and Linny had hidden under torn canvas, while the men argued about what to do with witnesses. When the tide rose, the girls ran. They followed the only honest shape in the storm, the lighthouse. By morning, the island was buried in sleet. He should have reported to the harbor. He should have relit the tower and rung the fog bell until someone answered. Instead, he barred the cottage door and watched the coast through a crack in the shutters. Because the red lantern returned. Not close enough to accuse, close enough to warn. That day, the girls learned the small geography of safety. The stove was warmest on the left. The floorboard near the pantry creaked. The oil room behind the cottage had a hidden crawl space where Jonas had once stored spare wicks during war years. Linny found a box of chalk and drew circles on the hearthstone. One for the tower, one for the cottage, one for the place where the sea had tried to keep them. Mara watched everything. She watched Jonas sharpen a knife, and she watched him set it down out of her reach, handle turned away from himself, as if proving he would not use it to frighten her. She watched him bring water without standing over her. Watched him speak to Linny as if a 7-year-old's answer mattered. Trust did not arrive all at once. It came in crumbs. A nod, a borrowed scarf, a child's hand no longer flinching when an old man reached for the kettle. By the second evening, Linny had fallen asleep in Jonas's chair with a piece of bread still in her fist. Mara sat awake beside the stove, wrapped in a blanket too large for her shoulders. "You'll get blamed," she said. Jonas did not pretend to misunderstand. For the dark tower? For all of it. He looked through the window at the Black Sea. "I have been blamed for weather before. Not like this." "No," he said. "Not like this." Mara swallowed. "Come." Jonas heard the fear under the sentence, and the hope hidden beneath the fear. "Then we will let him hear you," he said. Mara looked at him sharply. "Not me," Jonas said. "You." The next morning, hoofbeats cracked across the frozen lane. Jonas stood before the cottage door before the first fist struck it. 3 harbor men waited outside with rifles wrapped in oilcloth. Behind them stood Captain Torrin March, commander of the North Key, a man with a storm-gray beard, a torn uniform coat, and grief so raw it made him look dangerous. His eyes moved past Jonas, to the scarf hanging near the stove, boots drying by the fire, to the blood on the wash basin, then back to Jonas. "Where are my daughters?" Mara made a sound behind the door. Torrin heard it. His face broke for half a second, then hardened into command. "Open the room." Jonas did not move. The harbor men raised their rifles. Torrin stepped closer. "You failed to light the tower. My boat wrecked below Widow's Teeth. My daughters vanished. And now I find their boots in your house." The accusation was clean. Too clean. It gave everyone a place to put their fear. Jonas felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He could surrender the children and save himself. He could explain and be shouted down. But he could point toward the reef and be called a liar. So he chose the only proof that mattered. He opened the door behind him. Mara stood there with Linny tucked against her side. Torrin reached for them. Mara stepped back. That tiny movement struck him harder than any rifle shot. "My girl," he said, softer now. "Come here." Mara's eyes filled, but she did not move. "Let her speak first," Jonas said. One of the harbor men cursed. Torrin turned on him with a look that silenced the yard. Mara lifted her chin. Her voice came out rough, but it held. "The red lantern was not from the tower," she said. "It blinked from Widow's Teeth. 3 times. Then once. Then 3 again." Jonas went still. That was not a child's detail. That was a wrecker's code. Torrin looked from Mara to Jonas. Jonas said, "Your men know that signal?" Torrin's jaw tightened. Behind him, one of the harbor men shifted his weight. Just once, but Mara saw it. Jonas saw it too. With the rifle had red wax caught under one fingernail, the kind used to seal cheap storm lantern glass against leaks. Torrin saw Jonas looking. For a moment, the whole yard held its breath. Then the fog bell groaned from the harbor mouth. One slow iron note. A vessel was coming in blind. And somewhere beyond the sleet, the false red lantern blinked again. Everything that had been hidden now had minutes to become proof, or disappear. Torrin turned toward his men. "No one leaves this yard!" The man with the red wax bolted. Jonas moved first, not with youth, not with speed, with the brutal certainty of a man who knew every stone between the cottage and the tower. He slammed the gate across the lane, knocking the fleeing man into the snow. Torrin's other men pinned him down. The red lantern rolled from under his coat, its cracked glass glowing like an evil eye. But the ship was still coming. Jonas grabbed the lantern and ran for the tower. Mara followed before anyone could stop her. Linny screamed her sister's name, but Mara was already at Jonas's heels, limping through the sleet, one hand pressed to the bandage above her eye. Inside the tower, Jonas climbed. The stairs seemed longer than they had in all his years alone. His knee burned, but his lungs tore at the cold air. Behind him, Mara climbed in silence, carrying the shutter chain because his hands were full. At the top, the great lamp waited, cold and accusing. Jonas lit the wick. Gold fire rose inside the glass. Then he did not open the beam. He cut it with the shutter. Dark. Light. Light. Dark. A warning code. Not safe water. False beacon. Hold off. Again. Dark. Light. Light. Dark. Mara braced both feet and pulled when Jonas told her to pull. Outside, the tower did not shine like comfort. It spoke like a witness. It shouted in broken light over the reef, over the false lantern, over every lie the storm had been holding. Far out in the fog, the incoming vessel answered with a horn blast, and turned. The rocks took only foam. No hull, no men, no children. When Jonas and Mara came back down, Torrin March was waiting in the yard with Linny in his arms and the captured wrecker on his knees. The captain looked older now, not weaker, just stripped of the certainty he had worn like armor. He knelt in front of Mara. "I should have listened when the first report sounded wrong," he said, "and I should have asked before I commanded." Mara's face crumpled. This time, when her father reached out, she went to him, but she kept one hand wrapped around Jonas's sleeve. Torrin noticed. So did Jonas. The old keeper tried to step back, to give the family the space blood deserved. Linny would not let him. She reached from her father's arms and caught Jonas by the scarf. "No," she said. "He stayed dark for us." It was the kind of sentence adults could spend a lifetime explaining, and never improve. By dusk, the storm had broken apart over the island. The harbor men took the wrecker down the lane. The false red lantern lay smashed on Jonas's table. Torrin sent word across the bay that the lighthouse had not failed. It had testified. Inside the cottage, Mara tied a strip of blue thread around the lamp key. It came from the hem of her ruined dress. Linny tied one around Jonas's wrist, clumsy and crooked. "For steady hands," Linny said. Jonas looked at the little knot and found he had no words. He had kept a tower alive for 31 years. He had believed duty meant being where the harbor expected him, lighting what needed to be lit, and asking for nothing after. But that winter night taught him a harder duty. Sometimes the world is saved not by keeping the light on, but by knowing when a frightened voice is telling you the truth. Torrin brought his daughters home when they were strong enough to travel. A basket appeared at the lighthouse gate. Bread, mended wool, a drawing from Linny, a note from Mara with some small observation about weather, tide, or gulls, because she had learned that details could save lives. By spring, Jonas no longer ate every meal in silence. Some evenings, 3 figures climbed the lighthouse path before sunset: a captain, a girl with a healing scar above her brow, and a smaller child who counted the steps aloud, as if counting could make the world safe. Jonas would let them turn the lamp key together, and when the beam swept over the black water, it did more than warn ships away from stone. It told the coast that someone was watching. Someone was listening. And for the first time in many years, the light did not make Jonas Vale feel alone. It called him home.